Hello and welcome to week 14 in History of Psychology here, coming down to the wire, the end of the class. And we are in chapter 13 where we're going to look at the beginnings of psychoanalysis, a very major turning point in the history of psychology and the introduction of the basic core practices of psychotherapy. So this chapter focuses on the work of Sigmund Freud and his followers at the time, including his daughter Anna and various other individuals who followed and were students of Freud. In fact, one of the characteristics of Freud's role in the history of psychology is he was controversial because he said some pretty outlandish things. And his followers and detractors, the people who agreed with him and the people who vehemently disagreed with him, worked very hard to either support or go against him and created a explosion in research in psychology and different theories and whatnot that he was a I'm trying to think of the word when you he was he added a particular component that really caused a lot of action to happen in the field. That sometime later in this discussion right now, that word will come to me. Catalyst. There it is. He was a catalyst for the development of a lot of stuff in psychology. So let's look at the discussion. We're going to talk about work that actually was forwarded most by his daughter Anna, and that is the work around defense mechanisms. Now, in the triarchic structural approach to personality, we have the id representing a person's core desires and drives and selfishness. We have the superego, which is the learned values and norms and expectations of our society, the laws and rules that govern our behavior and pretty much go against our nature. And then we have the ego, which is the self, the I. So you can almost picture this, as I've talked about in my course book, as you have a little devil on one side, that's the id, and you have the angel on one side, that's the superego. And here I am trying to make a decision about where I'm going to go. Now, in the complexity of that structure, the ego is constantly trying to avoid anxiety. Anxiety is when there's an opposition between the id and the superego. In order to do that, it may make a decision. I'm going to go with this. It also may institute what we would call a defense mechanism. Now, the defense mechanisms that have been discussed throughout the history of psychodynamic theory, there's a whole bunch of them. You are probably familiar with denial. One way that you can resolve those things is to simply ignore and act as if it doesn't exist. So that is a defense mechanism that the ego uses to protect itself from the anxiety of this, what they may see as a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. Another one is projection. We might take an anger that we have about someone and we project it on them and say, they're angry at me. Or, I'm jealous, therefore you must be jealous. And we see those kind of mechanisms. Those kind of have to peel those apart like an onion to get to the bottom of those kind of things. But those are ways in which we act out and protect ourselves from this inner conflict that's going on. What I would like you to do is review the resources that we have and beyond on the different defense mechanisms that we have, and I would like you to talk about your favorite ones. Maybe ones that you found that you've done, maybe defense mechanisms that people in your life have used. The key here, from Freud's perspective, it's very, very crucial to understand, and we don't lose this idea, is that defense mechanisms were functional, meaning the ego instituted them because at the time the individual was not ready to deal with that thing. The problem is when we hold on to those defense mechanisms for a very, very long time and we never get around to dealing with them. In the short term, Freud felt that they were part of our ability to survive. So think of a dangerous situation that somebody, if you're thinking about running into a burning house and you have the little angel over here and the devil and that, and you say, you might get hurt, don't do it, and then the angel's like, well, you got to go get that picture of your mom, kind of thing, and you got this thing going on. You may just deny that whole thing and just act. Go in there, get the picture, save a person's life or something like that. Overwhelmed gets you through to be able to act in the world when you necessary, and then you can think about it later. And sometimes that's when we experience the real fear. We go in fearless. Not that we're all running into burning buildings all the time, but you might go do something, and it's on the other side that you find yourself contemplating that inner conflict, like, wow, what did I just do? You felt that defense mechanisms were very functional. So we don't necessarily look at these negatively unless they become destructive in and of themselves. And this we often see in the world of substance abuse. What we have in individuals that have severe substance use disorder. Their lives may be falling apart. They're losing relationships. They've lost their job, and stuff like this. And yet they maintain a denial that they don't have a drinking problem. So within some forms of intervention, there is a confrontation to attempt to break the denial, to actually burst through that defense mechanism that is keeping the individual from looking at their situation realistically, in order to help them to move on to the next point and actually address the issue of their substance use. This is not to be taken lightly. Breaking somebody's defense mechanism is not for the faint of heart, particularly when we are not in the position to support the aftermath of what might happen when we have exposed someone's ego to the reality of their situation. The individual can act out. The individual can commit suicide. The individual, all these things, because their ego is now exposed to this conflict. So these are serious things brought to that clinical level. So do the research on defense mechanisms. There's some very positive ones. Like when we take our anger and we express it in art or dance or music or something like that, that's a very, very effective way in order to deal with that energy. And so not all the defense mechanisms are necessarily bad, even when they have an extended time. So, all right, so that's our discussion. The quiz has you reflect upon some of the tools that Freud used in order to gain an understanding of the person's psyche. Now, we have free association, resistance, and repression. Now, let's explain these. Free association, just tell me what's on your mind and keep talking. The role of the therapist was to talk very little and the client talk a whole lot. And the free association would loosen up the ties to that person's repressed ideas, the things they don't want to say, and they may slip out. They may come out, either by a mistake, Freudian slip, or an aha moment where a person goes, oh, I never thought of that, and it's come out of that sort of free association. And then there's resistance. When, put simply, if someone's talking about someone's doing free association and I'm the therapist, I say, tell me, what's going on and blah, blah, blah. And they sort of say something, I'll go very stereotypically here. They talk about their mother-in-law or something like that. And I'll say, oh, tell me more about your mother-in-law. And he goes, no, let's avoid that. Or, well, and then they go off and talk about something else. That's an indication of resistance. And that's interpreted by the individual as something going on there. Not always real. Not always real. So we're looking at these skill sets. We have free association, just keep talking. Resistance, things you don't want to talk about or things that you avoid. And repression, the idea is there's stuff underneath the surface here. Read up on these things and comment on anything in your experience that may indicate the value of these things, maybe in your own life or in things that you've heard people say or people do, kind of looking at this skill set as, or maybe something that you would use. Have you ever used some of these techniques in a way in dealing with the people around you? So, and then the second question in the quiz is simply to describe the relationship between the id, the ego, and the superego. This is very much personality theory. The personality is structured according to Freud. There's a structure called the id, and there's a structure called the superego, and there's a structure called the ego. And most of it's below our consciousness. Explain. Describe those pieces and how they interact with each other. Okay, so that's what I'm looking for this week. And so I look forward to the discussion on defense mechanism. Don't put this off. Don't procrastinate. Defense mechanism. And I will see you in the discussion boards. You have a great week.